Ooh, how could the film Pan have been done better, or is there no saving it? The easy answer is no, so let's go with yes and let's try and fix. So you've got a couple of different options here. Option number one is if you want to keep Captain Hook as young as he is in this movie, then just tweak it around and make it a Captain Hook backstory film. This can still work with the title of Pan, because you can see how over the years Captain Hook's personality and demeanour and character completely shifts after he has met Peter Pan and is desperate to destroy him and kill him, and he says the word Pan a lot. He's obsessed. He slowly becomes a man whose mentality completely just breaks apart as he becomes obsessed with destroying this boy, and that could be a very interesting tale to tell, which I really like. The second way is that you could go into Peter Pan's history, and if you really want it to be a prequel to the story of Peter Pan, then you can go back in time and talk about Peter and how he became Peter Pan. You can do that story because we already know. You don't have to make anything up. We already know it. It's all already there in The Little White Bird. This is assuming that we want to keep the story as a prequel, which is the entire point of the movie Pan, so let's try and keep it as a prequel and make it work. So going back to option number one then, and making it a Captain Hook backstory, which then leads into the events of the Peter Pan story that we know and love. So you could do this very, very easily. We know a lot about Captain Hook's life from the play and the novel. We know he attended Eton School. You could see him as a young child. You could meet his aunt, who is the only family member really mentioned around him. And so the fact that he doesn't have parents anymore, that could be very interesting. So there's plenty of tragedy you could play with in Captain Hook's youth. You can then see him all the way through his school days, through Eton and the other colleges he attended, and then we see him going to become a pirate. We know that he served under Blackbeard as his bosun, and this is where we're going to tweak the movie Pan. You can keep the character of Blackbeard, but much as Hugh Jackman as an actor I enjoy, in this I did not. He needs to be recast. Ideally, I would cast him very similarly to Black Sails. Their Blackbeard is my favourite so far. I love Our Flag Means Death, but Black Sails just did it the best. So I would cast someone like that, maybe even bring back that actor because he was fantastic, and that's the kind of vibe you could go for. You could lean a sort of Treasure Planet direction. You could have that sort of father figure, bearing in mind if he had no parents, then at this point this is like the first kind of father figure Captain Hook would have had, and that kind of dynamic between them, and then seeing him going off and having his own ship, and then you see him finally flourishing, becoming Captain Hook, and then he goes to the Neverland. And then we see how it all starts to unravel. He has this good form and this great education and all this stuff about him. He has risen up to become a really good pirate, and then he lets it all crumble because he meets and fights Peter Pan. That he keeps coming back to the Neverland over and over again. You see them fight one day where Captain Hook is possibly swinging wildly, and he's just wildly driven to destroy this boy like a lion trying to swat at a fly, and then we see Peter chop off his hand, fling it to the crocodile, and the crocodile starts pursuing him. Perhaps he doesn't know the crocodile is pursuing him at first, just sees it eat the hand, and he sort of limps away, bleeding from the fight, goes back to the ship, and maybe at that point he does decide to go away from the Neverland for a while, comforted by his crew. Mr. Smee is there. Maybe you can get into the dynamic of him and Mr. Smee as well. I really love their relationship, and sure, you can ship them as well. You can have a little bit of that going on. Why the hell not? But then he notices the crocodile, and he hears that tick, 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 and he starts to get haunted by it. Maybe he doesn't keep clocks around him anymore because he wants to always hear the ticking and know which tick it is. And you could delve into that madness, all-consuming madness, and the fact that he then goes and gets his new hook, and he still goes back to try and fight Peter Pan. And eventually you'd see him unraveling and becoming completely insane with it, to the point where he does horrible, dark things, and eventually dies. And it could be a huge big character study, and you call it Pan because Pan was his downfall. Alternatively, you could go the direction of Peter Pan's backstory, although having just planned out a movie about Captain Hook's backstory, I am leaning more towards that one. But you've still got all this information about Peter. We know that when he was about a week old, he flew away from his parents' window and he never, ever, ever became a human ever again. You could learn about the history of birds and how in this world that J.M. Barrie created, all children were once birds and how they can sort of remember it, and then Peter could fly, and then he meets the fairies. You could see all these wonderful creatures in Kensington Gardens, and then you could fill in the gap, because there is a time jump, a huge one, between Peter becoming the betwixt and between boy when he was about a week old and all his time in Kensington Gardens, and then the Peter that we meet, who has physically changed a lot, who we meet with the Darling family much later on. You could fill in that time gap, which could be really interesting. And then you could end that movie with Peter at the Darling's nursery window to reclaim his shadow, something like that. So either one of those I think would be really, really interesting. I'm personally leaning towards Captain Hook because he deserves to have a really good movie made about him. But what do you guys think? Either of those fix the movie Pan, or should we just scrap it altogether? Also, obviously it goes without saying, don't whitewash Tiger Lily, and don't ship her with the man who literally wiped out most of her people. Any other thoughts, theories, or questions? Chuck them in the comments down below.